All right, this is chapter 13, section 4, part 2, and continuing on from our previous lesson that we talked about facial expressions. Now we're going to get into theories of emotion. Emotions are states of feelings that influence thought and behavior. People respond emotionally to events and situations in a variety of ways. Psychologists have different theories about what emotions are and where do they come from and how do they operate. According to the opponent process theory, originated by psychologist Richard Solomon, emotions often come in pairs, with one emotion being followed by its opposite. That is, one emotion, for example, extreme happiness, tends to be followed by feelings that are opposite, for example, extreme sadness, rather than by a neutral feeling. So Solomon and his colleague suggested, J.D. Colbert suggested that people were inclined to maintain balance in their own emotional lives. When this balance is upset by a strong emotional response to a particular situation, an opponent process or an opposite emotional response occurs. The opponent process eventually restores emotional balance. So it just balancing itself out, like the yin and the yang. For example, although a musician might have practiced in preparation for her recital, she could feel anxious, and like when she goes on the stage, she might feel nervous before she goes on the stage. And once she begins to play, however, the focus on the music, her anxiety might disappear or be replaced by tremendous relief, even elevation. And the first emotion she felt was anxiety, was followed by its opposite, which was relief. I definitely feel like that all the time. When I'm super anxious about a presentation I got to give for college, I always feel really anxious before giving a presentation or talking with my professor. And then after that meeting, I feel 10 times better. I feel like a weight has lifted off my chest. I feel like I'm free. That is 100% true. Or if I have something else that's really weighing on my mind and I'm nervous about it, and after I do it, I feel 10 times better. Like the first day of school, you and most of your classmates would probably agree with a common sense approach to emotions. What the heck is this? Let's learn about the common sense approach. According to this view, when something happens to a person or a certain situation, the person quickly interprets the situation. The interpretation triggers body sensations that signal a feeling or emotion. The emotion in turn triggers a behavior. For example, a person who is walking down the street and encounters a large snarling dog may sense that he or she is in danger. That person then feels anxious, and that's a body sensation, and quickly turns down to the nearest street to avoid the dog or the behavior. Many psychologists agree that thoughts, appraisal of the situation, come before our feelings of the behavior. They maintain that people's appraisals of their situations are the keys to emotional response. That is, people's thoughts, feelings, and behavior are strongly intertwined, and their thoughts to some degree determine their emotional and behavioral responses. Other psychologists, however, believe that it's important to understand the biology of emotion. According to these psychologists, the activities of the nervous system and hormones play a more important role in determining emotion and what people are thinking about their situations. Some psychologists even believe that people's behavior determines their thoughts and feelings. Three important theories of emotion are the James Lange theory and the Cannon-Bard theory, and the theory of cognitive appraisal. Now, what are these? Let's learn about these. In the 1800s, philosopher and psychologist William James suggested that people's emotions follow rather than a cause, but their behavioral reactions. That is, people act first and then react emotionally according to the way they acted. For example, a person crossing the street who looks up and sees a truck bearing down, acts to get out of the way, and then feels fright. So you're going to act first, and then you're going to feel. James would say that the emotions of fear and panic are the result of jumping out of the way of the truck and not the cause of the action. This theory, also proposed by a Danish biologist, Carl G. Lang, about the same time. Hence, that's why it's called the James Lang theory of emotion. Makes sense. According to James and Lang, certain situations trigger reactions called instinctive bodily response patterns. I've heard of that before. These patterns include specific feelings and behaviors. For example, a physical threat can trigger one of two instinctive response patterns: fighting or fleeing from the situation, the fight or flight response. According to this view, people who meet the threat by fighting would experience the emotion of anger because, and only after, they acted aggressively. So what are you going to do? Are you going to stay and fight, or are you going to flee? I guess it all depends on the situation. If a moving car is coming right at you, I suggest you flee. Don't try to fight the moving car. You're not going to win. People who meet the threat by fleeing would experience the emotion of fear because, and after, they ran away from the situation. In other words, their behavior would come first, followed by the emotion that fit the behavior. Starting to make sense? The James Lang theory suggests that people can change their feelings by changing their behavior. Changing one's behavior to change one's feeling is an approach used in behavior therapy, a method that has sometimes been employed to treat certain psychological disorders. The James Lang theory has been criticized, however, because it downplays the role of human cognition. This theory views the cognitive appraisal of a situation as having little or no role in determining human behavior. And the James Lang theory also minimizes the role of personal values and choice as factors in human behavior. Walter Cannon and Philip Bard were two psychologists, scientists who study the functions of the human body. Their view on emotion was rooted in psychology, and they suggested, so this is a different theory, that emotions accompany the bodily responses that are aroused by an external stimulus. Now, according to this theory, a situation triggers an external stimulus that is processed by the brain. The brain then stimulates bodily changes and cognitive activity. And that's basically the experience of the emotion simultaneously. Emotions are not produced by bodily responses. The central question raised by this theory is whether bodily responses and emotions do in fact occur at the same time, and in some cases it seems that they do not. For example, pain or a threat may trigger bodily responses, such as rapid heartbeat, in someone before that person begins to experience distress or fear. I sometimes get rapid heartbeat when I'm in the ocean for no reason. When I'm sitting out there, when I'm surfing, waiting for a wave to come, sometimes my heart rate increases really fast out of the blue for no reasons. Maybe that's because I'm anxious or I'm scared. I'm not sure. Also, people who manage to narrow escape from a dangerous situation often become quite upset or shaken afterward, and they have a chance to consider what might have happened to them. In these situations, it seems that there's a two-stage reaction that is involved. A bodily response is followed by the emotional reaction. So if you've ever been in a fight or trying to think of something, if you ever saved somebody's life, if you've ever been in an emergency situation, I can tell you from firsthand experience that my reaction after I'm in any of those situations is that my hands begin to shake pretty rapidly because that's, I guess, the adrenaline wearing off, or you just realize you put your life in danger and you could have died. So maybe it's the fear running out of me. I'm not sure. Other theoretical approaches in emotion have focused on cognitive factors. One theory, called the theory of cognitive appraisal, argues that all emotions have similar bodily response patterns. That is, the body reacts in physical similar ways, even though different emotions are being experienced. This theory maintains that the way people label an emotion depends largely on their cognitive appraisal of the situation. The cognitive appraisal that occurs is based on many factors. These factors include a person's analysis of the situation and the ways other people are reacting in the same situation. When other people are involved in the same situation, an individual will look at the way they are reacting and then compare his or her reaction to theirs to arrive at what seems to be the right response. So, yeah, maybe if you are in a life-threatening situation and or you see somebody, for example, you see somebody in the water and you think that they're drowning, the people around you might be reacting like, oh my gosh, he's drowning. You might not think that that person's drowning, but the fact that all these other people around you are saying, oh my gosh, he's drowning, that might trigger that response. So that could be that cognitive appraisal point. All right. The theory of cognitive appraisal is quite different from the James Lange theory. The James Lange theory asserts that each emotion is distinct and is easily recognized by bodily situations. The theory of cognitive appraisal asserts that all emotions are rooted in a common bodily sensation that argues that we label these sensations differently according to the situation. The truth may lie somewhere in between, just like everything. In summary, it is possible that the bodily response patterns of different emotions are more distinct than the theory of cognitive appraisal suggests, but we are not as distinct as the James and Lange theory suggests. In addition, research with PTE scans suggests that different emotions involve different parts of the brain. Furthermore, the lack of control over our emotions and ignorance of to what is happening to us appear to be distressing experience. Thus, it seems that our cognitive appraisals of our situations do affect our emotional responses, but do not extend the envisioned by some cognitive appraisal theorists. So it's all very complex. Doesn't really matter what you believe in. There's different theories. There's probably some truth within the middle of both of those theories. All right, evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology attempts to understand human psychology through the lens of natural selection. As you may recall from biology, natural selection is the process that operates from generation to generation. Plants and animals that are well adapted to their environment survive and pass their genes down to the next generation. Those that have characteristics ill-suited to their environment will die and fail to breed. Evolutionary psychologists apply these principles to human behavior. Psychological traits that help humans survive and procreate got passed down to future generations. Traits that resulted in the death or failure to procreate got eliminated. For example, fear of the dark. Early humans without this fear might have wandered into the dark and gotten eaten by predators. Other examples range from our tastes in food to our affection for children. So these all might have been passed down. This is what evolutionary psychology teaches us, that we inherited a lot of these traits. We just weren't just naturally afraid of these things. This has been passed down for generation and generation and generation. And maybe that's why there's some fear for me. I have a fear of the water, believe it or not, open water. So what does that mean? Fear of wide open water and deep water. Maybe that's because one of my ancestors was crossing the ocean and sank his ship. I have no idea. It's a possibility, but that could be evolutionary psychology. maybe that's where my fear of water stems from. Probably not, but all right, one subject that evolutionary psychologists have studied excessively is play. All children play. In fact, the young of most mammals engage in playful behavior. Now, is there a purpose to playing? Some people think there isn't, but not according to evolutionary psychology. Play is so widespread that it must have been some type of evolutionary advantage. So there was one study that confirmed that play helps the young develop both mental and physically. Among social animals, play helps teach rules and establish hierarchies. So who's in charge? That's what a hierarchy is you have somebody who is above somebody else. Power also noticed that play does not end with childhood. So Thomas Power was the one who did this study. Both human and non-human adults continue to play, both with the young and with each other. The evolutionary benefit seems twofold. I guess you can consider video games playing. Skateboarding, that's playing. Basketball, that's playing. When adults play with the young, they help the young develop and learn social rules. Play among adults keeps them physically and mentally agile. So playing is a good thing. Another mystery that evolutionary psychology has investigated is emotion. If rational thought is humanity's big advantage over the rest of the animals, why do we still have emotions? Psychologists found that emotions actually help people make the right decisions. They also found that emotions perform an essential role in interactions with other people. However, our primitive emotions are not ideal suited for the modern world. That is true. For example, people generally show more fear of insects than of speeding cars and other modern hazards. That's correct. My wife is petrified of bugs, but when it comes to cars zooming by, she's not as afraid. I take a more realistic approach. I could care less about a bug. I'm 10 times the size of a bug. Bugs don't scare me, but a speeding car, yeah, that's going to kill you. All right, section 4 review. Emotions have biological, cognitive, and behavioral components. Facial expressions of emotions are the same around the world, and psychologists have developed several different theories of emotion. All right, that's your lesson for today. Hopefully you learned something. Peace out.